Hello YouTube, this is Ezekiel doing another little video for Combat Mission Battle for Normandy. A little bit different this time. I am in the scenario editor. Just want to show off a little project that I've dived into and basically just share some of the tips and tricks I've learned in the scenario editor for this particular version 2 of Combat Mission. The scenario I want to build is a little engagement that I've known about for a long time and always found very, very interesting. And I think I was actually quite surprised it actually wasn't in any of the combat mission, the module, or couldn't be in the base game, it wasn't in the Commonwealth module. And that is Operation Windsor, which is around the village of Carpiquet, on the British sector of the Normandy operation. This was a very bloody affair, especially for the Canadians, and is probably most remembered for their brigade-size assault on this one village and airfield, which was like a fortress held by the 12th SS Division, the Hitler Youth Division, and the members of the 1st Battalion occupied the airfield and the village here, and held out very fanatically and ferociously against the Canadians, far greater in their number. It took an enormous amount of artillery to pretty much destroy the entire town and parts of the airfield, including naval gunfire, and that still didn't make the Germans surrender or run away. It was absolutely crazy. So you may remember the video stopped a little while ago as my old computer gave up the ghost and had to buy a new computer. In that time where I had no access online to my combat mission series, I did a little bit of research into it with the intention of going into this design process, and I can sort of starting to take shape. Very, very early days yet. So what you're seeing here is, of course, a Google map. Actually, I think it's from Google Earth, to put it more accurately, of the particular area size, and I'll just quickly, there we go, and I'm very, it's not final, of course. Looks like a tapestry or a kid's drawing. Just slowly, just very quickly done a very quick outline to give me some ideas of scale, of basically where the fields start and end. The major roads here I have to really draw in are probably going to be crucial in the battle, and roughly the lighter roads, which are where the village was built on, the railway line, and down here is the just a rough very rough outline, of the airfield itself. That's the top little bit of the runway. So I'm doing that first and doing some elevation testing before I do anything in detail. Scale, I think, when you're building a map, scale is, of course, the most important thing. So this is pretty much an accurate one-to-one in terms of size, length and width of the northern approach for this operation. It's still quite large. I'll just double check the size. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far. Oh, it's up the top, what I was saying. So yeah, you can see up here it's 2.5 or 2.6 almost kilometres long by 1.8 kilometres in depth, or height, I believe that is. So basically, yeah, it is a very, very large open space, and that's what really made this battle a little bit unique and took my eye. It was basically sort of like in some ways, a return to desert warfare, even with the famous German 88 set up in the airfield in the village, firing over this enormous expanse of wheat fields, which was, in some places, I think it was about a 2 kilometre long open space, which they could pick off Canadian tanks and infantry. So very, very deadly. And then you had to actually get to and fight through in urban combat through this small little town or village. So the operation itself, a bit of a history lesson. July 4th, 1944, straight after Operation Epsom, which you may remember is shown in the Commonwealth Module, the main Allied campaign. So it's set straight after that operation ends. It was actually meant to be tacked onto the back of Operation Epsom, but delays and things not really working out as planned meant it was pushed back by a couple of times, I believe, until Operation Windsor was the final product. And that dog's been barking. If you can hear it, that dog's been barking all night, so apologies. So where was I? Operation Windsor finally went ahead on July 4th, and it was tasked with to the Canadian 3rd Infantry Division, which was meant to actually take the airfield on D-Day, or June 7th, like one of their first objectives, and they sort of got close, but they were held back by a counterattack by the 21st Panzer Division and the 12th SS, which was arriving in the operation space. And they pretty much sat looking at each other, staring at each other for a good 2-3 weeks while all the other operations such as Epsom went on around them. And then finally it was their turn. There has been... The operation itself was always seen as a prelude to Operation Charnwood, is it? The one that... Charnwood, that went through and captured the northern half of Caen itself, which only started a couple of days after. So that's historically been how Windsor's been viewed. But I've actually been doing my research in the last month or so. There's actually been quite a bit of commentary saying it wasn't really connected to Charnwood. It was more a prelude to Operation Jupiter, which followed soon after, where the Canadians and British attacked further south of this map, south of the airfield at the high ground near the river, and to the east of the city of Caen, which was still heavily defended by the Germans on a long ridgeline. So there's some conflict over why Windsor occurred, but the general consensus was it was terribly led on the Allied side. The 3rd Infantry Division Division Commander Keller has copped a lot of criticism for not handling it well, not giving the 8th Infantry Brigade enough support when things started to turn pear-shaped. And as I said before, the actual Canadians took pretty heavy casualties during the operation. These two is, well, essentially the one day of the main attack, and then surviving the counter-attacks by the Germans the next day. Anyway, the forces involved were, as I said a number of times, 3rd Infantry Division and 12th SS. 3rd Infantry Division was the 8th Brigade, led by Blackadder, which tickled my fancy, being a fan of the old BBC show. Spelt a little bit differently, though. He led the 8th Brigade at this time, and had 3 battalions of infantry under him. I should know the battalion names, but they elude me at this point. I know the Queen's Own Rifles was, of course, one of them. They were popular for the wrong reasons, but lost quite a number of their soldiers earlier in the Normandy campaign to the 12th SS, who infamously executed Canadian prisoners. That's a bit of a sad tale, but Google it and you'll... it's a very interesting story, but very sad at the same time. Anyway, so their 3 battalions. In addition, they also had tank support from the Fort Garry Horse, which was in the northern attack, which this map and this battle scenario I'm designing will actually show. Had 2 squadrons of tank support, and it's a lot of tanks. And then also quite enormous amounts of artillery and naval assets, and also air assets coming in to pound the area. It was the entire 3rd Division's worth of artillery, naval gunfire from the British warships opened up the engagement, and then there was also Hawker Typhoon air support during the operation itself. So an enormous amount of support, and all this was thrown against. There's also elements of the Hobart Funnies tanks, from the 79th British Tank Division, things like Churchill Crocodiles and mortar tanks and all that, which were brought in to really dig out the last of the Germans. All this might was thrown. And also, I keep forgetting, there was also an additional 4th Infantry Battalion, which was not going to be shown in this map, but that was actually on the southern approach to the airfield, was a diversionary or secondary attack, which was meant to capture the southern side with another squadron of tanks down there. So basically an enormous amount of Allied support just for this one little area. Facing against them was members of, as I said, the 1st Battalion of the 12th SS, and they estimated no more than around 150 German SS soldiers holding this village and airfield. When you think about that, that's enormous odds, and to last as long as they did and cause so much damage it's absolutely amazing militarily. And for better or worse, the sheer zealous fanatic-like hold of this village is what makes things really interesting. Anyway, so it was a depleted battalion of SS with some leftover Luftwaffe forces, which initially fled the airfield, but there's some speculation they managed to pull some of those soldiers back with anti-aircraft battery, a few tanks, Panzer IVs initially, and then Panthers reinforcing. It was perfect tank country with the enormous wheat fields and also the open airfield itself. And enormous amounts of pillboxes, minefields, barbed wire, a real fortress and a real linchpin on the entire German defence of Caen. The initial concrete bunkers were built. They held this airfield, remember, since 1940, so they initially built it up as a defensive point, and then in addition, when the Atlantic Wall was being built, it got further reinforced, and then further reinforced again a third time when the 12th SS moved in, when the Normandy operation actually started. So they had a good 2-3 weeks looking at the Canadians and British forces and further reinforcing their defences. So they've definitely got the positional advantage, but and the Canadians have the enormous numerical advantage. So I'll put this onto. Let's see how quickly this loads. So there's not going to be any trees or anything amazing, but it'll still give you an idea of the rough idea of the layout. Loading. Bloody dog. It's not my dog, it's a neighbour's dog. Big dog, but come on. Also, I apologise for the number of videos coming out. Been a little bit distracted, Crusader Kings 2, but still no good at that game. Keep losing the entire English throne as soon as William the Conqueror dies. Anyway, so here we go. So you can see the rough outline of the starting field. So the Canadians set up on the western side here. Down here somewhere off map there'll be a village of Marcelette. I'm probably butchering that name, but anyway. Running along to the north is the railway line. Don't quote me, I'm pretty sure this is the same railway line that runs all the way to Cherbourg, or Carentan then Cherbourg. Don't quote me, but I think that is. So you see, it gives you the extent of the wide open spaces they had to cross. No bocage or hedgerows, no real defences, maybe a fence here and there. There was some elevation changes, especially where the Canadians deployed, so I've got to still factor that in. And once you get all the way across these fields, which I hope will be possible game-wise, you get to here, which is the start of the actual village itself. So you see the rough idea of where the roads are going to go. The village itself was like 2 sections. I've got some older maps showing how it looked in the 1940s. So there's like 2 sections here with an open space running through the middle. So vicious house-to-house fighting, and there's lots of German defences. Then roughly somewhere around here, I think it is. That's where you get another little small open space with further German defences at the start of the actual airfield proper. And then down here you have, there's where the hangars are, a bit of a forested area separating the village and the wheat fields here. And the control, they're called the northern buildings. So you've got hangars and then the northern buildings running through here, which was a further, layer of defence. So that's the rough show of the map. As I said, the Canadians came down here through the village, cleared out the village and moved on into the airfield itself. Alright, we'll just back out of that. I'll go to units. I'll put in a rough idea. Don't look at this too much if you don't want to spoil it. Okay, so we get this done. But this is roughly, if I can remember, trying to remember where exactly. I think it's going to load with the units, the Allied units on board now. Gives you a rough idea what the Canadians had available. Not all at once. There was a follow-up for one of the battalions, I believe it was the Queen's Own Rifles, was actually a follow-up battalion to the initial attack. But yeah, you'll see what I mean. It's got to be scaled down a bit. There's no way our little computers can probably cope. I've got a few ideas how to scale it down, but definitely if there's any thoughts on... no, it's not loading. I always forget this bit. I think I put deploy. No, that's right, I got to push deploy. Sorry about that. Any ideas of further scaling it down would be beneficial. Yeah, got to remember there's also the enormous amount of artillery support, which is already scaled down, even what I've got here, at naval gunfire. Saying that, there's going to be a few little rules in place if you want to play the scenario properly to just reflect historically what happened. A lot of the artillery support was actually used before the Canadians actually arrived at the village. They really pounded that village to death with everything they had, and very little support was actually available during the operation itself. So, okay, here we go. That's a lot of green dots. So that's roughly, what, 3 battalions of infantry, minus things like anti-tank guns, anything to slow them down, and 2 squadrons of Shermans look like. That's roughly what the Canadians had. Yeah, I may have to drop the universal carriers. There's another idea to drop, because it was an infantry fight with tank support, so I've got to keep that in mind. And quickly. So, on-map mortars, may have to do something about that. Yeah, definitely have to do something about that. Oh, they're the off-map mortars. That's funny, I think I may have picked the wrong unit there. It's meant to be artillery. Yep, so howitzers, 3 batteries of howitzers. Definitely have to assume mortars, too many mortars there. In the battleships, 16-inch, 6-inch and 15-inch support. Limited ammo there, so I'll have to change the ammo. And if I get back to... And just some Hawker Typhoons that will come in later on. There's actually enough for an entire squadron, I think it was, from what I've read. Won't do that in the game, that's a bit of overkill. And facing them, to give you an idea, if I do deploy Axis... or something like this. I thought it was going to load quicker. May have to edit this out if I remember. So I really don't want to scale down the Axis forces much. Canadians probably, because that's just enormous. But the problem I've got by scaling down the Germans, you have the real problem of losing too many of the forces to artillery strikes, which in reality didn't happen. There's a few little tricks I'm thinking of that could actually hide the Germans from the outset for the initial part of the engagement. Well, that's not it. Where are they? Here they are. So much smaller. A lot of the enormous amounts of fortifications, probably more than that, depending on when they're actually used on the map, on the final map. Some batteries of 88s, some infantry guns, and of course the infantry themselves. Very well equipped SS. So, and of course the Panzer IVs, which were on scene very, very quickly. I think, yeah, that's got 2 Panthers as well, which would come on reserve. Yeah, so basically, yeah, that's a smaller force facing them. But I remember a lot of these troops would be fanatics or, well trained, but also the morale would be incredibly good, so they'd be able to stick around for a very long time. They also get some off-map artillery. The Germans had some off-map putting out mortars, the mortar fire. The Germans and Nebelwerfers, I probably won't keep those, that's a little bit overkill, but they were generally used in the German counterattack, or as soon as the Canadians had taken the village, so they're probably going to be dropped. But yeah, the Germans used counter-battery fire immediately at the start of the Canadian advance. They knew exactly what the Canadians were up to, and had pre-planned everything. So that really didn't help. So, sorry, it will help the Germans, but it didn't really help the attack. So yeah, that's the rough first run of my research from in terms of the forces available. I could drop one of the infantry battalions because they did come on technically a lot later under what this scenario is showing, to move on into the airfield proper. And their attack was blunted separately, so that I could remove one battalion of Canadian infantry. But anyway, back to the map. So I'll just quickly talk about some of the research I've been doing. It's got quite extensive. It's littered all over my documents folder at the moment on my hard drive. For those, I haven't mentioned it here, many moons ago when I was still a university student, one of my degrees was I was doing history. And so I learned a lot of little tricks of the trade to actually research, and some of those I've picked up after uni finished. So yeah, when you're designing anything at this scale, generally your major history books on Normandy and the very macro history top level books won't have a lot of detail that you require for an operation of this depth, this size. Always, where possible, go for the first-hand accounts. It's my little tip that I've sort of followed over the years. Also, with the advent of Google, it's become a lot easier to find different books that either are no longer published or you wouldn't really find in a regular bookshop. So I've found copies of books and also just academic scholarly papers on the operation, and revisions of different people's texts. So the big tip there would be to not only use Google itself, but also a little subset of Google or Google Scholar. You get a lot more academic flavoured texts with a lot of detail and a lot of micro-history. That also links very well into things like Google Books, where you can get search through online records of I'm guessing open sourced material, or books that have been allowed to be published on the web with the intent you can also buy them from here. So the wealth of material available for any operation, especially some of these ones a little bit more popular, is enormous. You just have to know where to look. Also, maps. Maps are incredibly important. I'm not talking about Google Maps here. I'm talking about any type of maps or photographs from the actual time period, from the 40s. A little bit hard with smaller or less well-known operations, but for big ones like Windsor or Charnwood and that, there should be plenty out there. The more detailed, the better. The closer in it is, like the tactical level. Firstly, you get an indication of where the battalions went, their course of the attack, but also you get things like, which won't show up on present-day Google Maps or anything like that, things like where bunkers were located or where particular German or Allied strong points were, things that really should be represented in a combat mission scenario. So yeah, that's probably the big tips. I mean, the level of detail I've got in the materials sitting on my hard drive at the moment is I've got it right down to the company commanders' names, and in all cases, actually, I've got all companies from the 8th Brigade, and I've also got the names of some of the platoon leaders who played important parts, a few sergeants, but I probably won't include those. It's a little bit excessive. What else? Just things like when you can get the detail in those first-person accounts of when artillery fire came in, so you get an indication of when reserves should actually arrive, and such. And it sort of gives you an indication of trigger points, such as when things should really heat up in the battle, such as, once they reach the border of Carpiquet, in this case, in the village, should it heat up immediately then, or should it heat up once they're actually inside the village and did the Germans let them actually enter? So that type of material, that's why you want those first person and detailed level accounts. Also, don't forget to look at books or texts that talk about specific unit histories. There's plenty on the 12th SS, and also on the Canadians. The Canadian, I think it's Canadian government, not too sure. I think it's sort of similar to like Australia here. I think Canadian government's done quite a lot on preserving their history and their role in the Normandy battles. And so those unit materials will give you a lot of information as well, like estimates on like company strength at the time and what the troops were facing and what their morale level should be, and gives you an idea of what they've just been through and what they're going to go through. Like, you got to keep in mind the Canadians here had suffered, well, not this particular brigade, but had suffered serious tank losses before this battle when Kurt Meyer ambushed them early in June. I think Kurt Myers famously said it was, a great moment. It's like an unbelievable moment, seeing an entire, Canadian armoured force go across, right across his face. So anyway, that type of material is also really good to get a sense of what morale settings you should put your troops at, and that type of detail. So yeah, that's generally the type of research I've been doing. The maps, I always start off with Google Maps, especially when I'm trying to build something like this. Yes, it probably has changed in some respects, especially things like villages and towns shouldn't really be followed. But as a general rule, things like fields and that, it shows you where the open ground is and where the forests generally are. So if I just go back to the new overlay feature, is amazing. big help. So this is actually from Google Earth. And the reason I did it in Google Earth is because you can actually twist the map around. If you always trust on true north, you're going to find your scenario designs are very, very hard. The reason being is all these things like straight lines and all that suddenly become crooked when you're trying to build it in combat mission, and that comes incredibly hard to try and follow. Because all your roads and railway lines and that have to be generally at a 45-degree angle. So if you twist the map around so your major road arteries, or in this case the railway line at the top, was a good guide, and maybe this one's a little bit off, but it'll probably be straight in the final version. These type of things can be roughly straight. Things like fields and the types of ground layers, they can sort of mix and match. You can sort of adjust it to fit, but if you've got a wide open road but then your version of the game is all twisty and turny, it's sort of like breaking what it really was. So first things first, always, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, I don't make any scenarios or maps or anything for Battlefront or nothing like that. It's purely out of pure interest on my part. But yeah, always make sure they're nice and straight if they are straight in real life. The second thing is, as I said at the beginning of the video, is scale. If you look at down here, I've just quickly done a rough cut and paste, but just to give you an indication of the corner what 200 meters is. So when I use the overlay in here, I can sort of match up how many individual squares should be in that box. From memory, it's 1 square equals 8 meters. 90% sure that's right. Hope so. So you can sort of measure out and get a really very close, I wouldn't say exact, but very, very close scale of how big this map should be. So they're the big things to worry about. Then do your initial draw over an overlay like this. And you can always just keep referring through with the cycle button to see how it's going to look by itself and how it looks against the satellite image. Oh, that's the other thing, sorry. Sometimes satellite images are better than the actual maps themselves, especially when you're trying to stencil out, things like fields and crops and all that. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there. That's just an opening of a little bit of history lesson and the opening of what I want to do with this project. It's going to take ages, I know. But as I said, it's been an engagement that has interested me for quite some time. And especially doing the research in the last few months, it sort of really did pique the interest again. So yeah, I'll do a few more videos as things progress and show you how it's going. I'll try and give a little theme. So this one was research and setup, or initial setup I should say, of the map. Maybe the next one I'll talk about is some of the little tricks that I've picked up over the years. And if any of you guys have any tricks yourselves, feel free to send me a message or post them, and I'll try them out and show them off in the next video. Also, let's have a look. And also, I may also talk about the briefing. Sometimes a good briefing and a bad briefing, I've found, really does make or break a scenario. Very, very important. A lot of text is the briefing, so I'll probably go over that. I've already got the briefings for this drafted when I was doing the research and had no real gaming computer. A little bit bored. So yeah, I'll probably go over that too, and yeah, we'll go through this process together, to sound very corny at the end here. Anyway, we'll get back to gaming proper in the near future, but in the meantime, like, subscribe, and leave your comments below, and thanks for watching, everyone.